And Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, in a cryptic message on Monday, he said, although US President Donald Trump claims he has all the cards, Iran too holds quite a lot of leverage. A tweet by Ghalibaf is threatening, it's a symbolic message, and it asserts that Iran has significant leverage to disrupt global energy markets. Countering US pressure, Ghalibaf uses a mathematical formula. It shows Iran's potential supply disruption tools versus US demand side management capabilities. So essentially what Iran is saying is that they hold the cards in terms of geography while US has more economic power. And while they have already played their cards, Iran is yet to show and use all of their cards, mentioning that several of them are unplayed as of now. All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined by Burzine Wagmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, University of London. And I'm also joined by Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, columnist at the London Telegraph, who specializes in international affairs. To both my guests, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for making time. Let's start right off. This was a rather cryptic post by Ghalibaf, the parliament speaker of Iran. He mentions that Iran has yet to show and use most of its important cards, Bab al-Mandeb being an important one, pipelines, oil pipelines being another one, and these are unplayed as of now. Ms. Moutet, let me start with you. Coming to you regarding how or where these cards are going to come into play and who has the cards which are stronger, your opinion?
I don't think, first of all, that because President Trump uses this formula, which he also used and which Vice President Vance used in their negotiations, such as they were with Ukraine, that this is necessarily the way to look at things. But certainly both sides have got assets, and America has got the strong assets of a fleet that's capable of blocking the Straits of Hormuz, and that has an air force that has, with the help of the Israelis, managed to destroy a great deal of military capacity and some infrastructure capacity, and the nuclear bunkers where the uranium enrichment capacities are. So that's a lot on the American side. What Iran has it's always the case of asymmetric war. It's got the capacity to disrupt, as they said, the oil trade. And what they have done for the past 47 years is that we also know that they have disrupted the security of most of Europe and not as much the United States, but they have proxies, they have brigades that are, and they have Hezbollah, they have all sorts of more or less terrorist groups. That's an unspoken but very real threat from the point of view of Iran. It's a big nation with a great capacity. It has been weakened by the two-pronged war, but it still is something that they still have. And let's not forget that they are now complaining because America is blockading Hormuz again, but they started by blockading Hormuz, even though Hormuz doesn't belong to them, because the one side is Iran, the other one is Oman. Oman is too weak to do anything except comply. But I would say that I would give advantage to the US, but the Iranians certainly have got weapons.
All right. Let me take that point over to Burzine. Burzine, I understand we've interacted before, but I wanted to just add a few more points to this. Bab al-Mandeb. Now, that's one point where Iran says, yes, they seem choked. It's very apparent from their statements coming out that the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is hurting Iran. It's hurting them quite badly. Militarily, they've also been hurt. But also, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait has not been choked by them, and that's a possibility. We've seen that in the past. Yemen is right there. The Houthis are right there. That's a possibility. In your opinion, Burzine, do you feel Iran can now cause more disruption if they choke the other side as well? Over to you.
No, they can't. And a correction is required to your script, which you said in your opening remarks about Iran putatively claiming geographical superiority. Even that is not the case. Never mind the economic one, which Washington holds. And why? Let me explain that to your viewers. As of 27th April, CENTCOM has redirected about a good 38 Iranian vessels. And even prior to the war, cargo oil terminal could only store capacity of 13 billion tons. Now, this has been completely upended because $1.5 billion worth of Iranian crude, which has set sail, has been redirected back into the Persian Gulf, and 380 million worth of crude has been seized by the US Navy in the Indian Ocean, and those vessels have been redirected now towards the US. So Iran has no cards, which explains this latest move out of sheer desperation that they want to talk about, let's talk about unblocking the strait, and then we can talk about the nuclear issues and the rest of it later, because it is hurting. It is Iran which is claiming that it needs 300 billion in reparations and sanction relief, because with 112% food inflation, they can barely keep the lights on. And please also now talk about the economic superiority of the US. Trump has all the cards, and he's not making empty boasts. If you consider that today, Europeans have turned to 50% of their LNG supplies to the US and at least 15% of their crude. US energy companies were never embedded in global supply chains to this effect hitherto prior to the war. They have now become, and US suppliers, crude and LNG suppliers, are looking at a windfall in more ways than one. A good 45 plus empty super tankers are heading to the US to be filled up with US crude as we speak. So things are working in Mr. Trump's favor. It's just that people look at his bluster and dismiss him as making unreasonable remarks, but he is actually calling the shots in more ways than one.
All right. All fair points. I take those points, Burzine. Let me just counter on a few, and then let me go over to Ms. Mute for a comment. In terms of empty boasts or empty bluffs or empty boasts from Donald Trump, we've seen a lot of those ultimatums getting extended. And that's a fact, that there was a 48-hour deadline, there was a 5-day deadline, a 10-day deadline, another 1-day deadline, and then a ceasefire, and then it's unlikely ceasefire gets extended, then it does get extended. But at the same time, Iranians seem equally desperate for that deal. They have been proposing to the US, that's also a fact. But the Iranians did not show up when the US Vice President was willing to come in and have those talks, travel all the way 17 hours to Pakistan. Iranians just need to take a 2-hour flight. They're there in Pakistan, but not when the US President was there, US Vice President was there. Along with that, as far as the oil vessels which have been returned, absolutely fair point. But the military power that the US needs to return those vessels back to Iran, how long can US maintain that? With 3 aircraft carriers already deployed, hundreds of jets already deployed, thousands of troops already there in the region, how long can that be sustained? US definitely does not want to get stuck in another forever war. Let me now come to that with Burzine's points and whatever I've added. Ms. Mute, your comment.
I would say, first of all, that forever war is, it's true. Nobody wants us to say forever war, but 2 months is not forever war at all. We have become very impatient, but the capacity exists. And I also think that President Trump and the people around him perfectly know that if America blinks now, and if America steps back instead of negotiating hardly as they do now, they will be seen as an easy mark, and that will sort of blot the entire situation. I apologize. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was interrupted, but no, I don't think it's finished by any means. I also think that if it fails now, if America is seen to not be able to withstand something that is so far mostly talk and not real pressure, because what you've seen so far is American overcapacity, I might even say, and practically no fatalities, no failures. One very obvious victory, which was retrieving 2 pilots in a daring operation that has been admired around the world, and I've spoken to members of the French general staff, and they were in admiration of the way the Americans had managed that. I think that would be the end of the Trump presidency on dismal failure, and the example that would come to mind would be Jimmy Carter in 1979. So the stakes are much higher than just regional states for the Americans. They are world class, and the other countries, including Russia, which, as we saw in your subject, is very involved. That would be a sign of weakness that would affect the relationships and the sort of respective weight of the great powers around the globe. So they can't step back.
I hear your point. Burzine, just allow me a little time to substantiate my question to you, and then I'll come to you for a comment. Very quickly, just to add, Ms. Mute mentioned there were no fatalities. There are reports, NBC also carried that report, that perhaps the damage caused to the US bases across West Asia is far less than what has actually been caused. That being one. As far as the US military assets are concerned, a fair amount of assets have gone down, whether that was friendly fire or whether that was laundry fire or whichever fire, but they have taken damage. Apart from that, Saudi Arabia, UAE are looking at the likes of Ukraine to look for air defenses. They're even going after a British startup for air defense interceptors. That's when they already have the THAAD systems deployed, and that is a message to the US very clearly. And as far as Bab al-Mandeb, let me go back to that. In your appreciation, Burzine, do you really feel Iran does not have the capacity to disrupt when Bab al-Mandeb has been disrupted in the past as well? Over to you.
The Bab al-Mandeb question is a paper tiger. It can be disrupted up to a point, but then things do go back to normal because Israel and the others will come down heavily on them. Now, to come back again to this question of aircrafts, I can barely count on two hands the number of aircrafts that were destroyed, including the AWACS fighter at Prince Sultan Air Base, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of it, compared to the damage that has occurred with the Iranian Navy and Air Force practically inexistent. Why don't people talk about that, for example, in sheer numbers of aircrafts? Then you talk about the Ukrainians coming in. Well, that is precisely because Mr. Trump gave Zelensky the go-ahead to send Kiev's interceptor expertise over, which has helped the GCC states shore over so much and help. Israel has shared the Iron Dome with the UAE. We already know that. But none of this, as you purport, implies multilateral hedging by the GCC towards other partners. For one thing, they're not going to turn to China or Russia because they know the double game that they have played in supplying Tehran with real-time intelligence during this month-long war. So do not for a moment think that the GCC is going to wean itself away from the US. If anything, Dr. Gargash, former UAE foreign minister and the most senior Emirati diplomat, said, after this war, if anything, we are going to double down on our military relationship with the US because we can count on them and they are dependable. So to make out the US as being an unreliable partner simply flies in the face of reality. That is not true.
All right. I take your point, Burzine, but at one point regarding Donald Trump giving his blessing to Ukraine to go and share their air defense systems with Saudi Arabia, that can be contradicted because US had as many words told Zelensky, we don't need your help. It was about a week or 10 days later, we found Zelensky taking a Gulf tour. But as far as all the points shared by my guests, all the points I shared, I hope our audiences take away and form their own opinions. And that's the purpose of Point and Counterpoint. We present facts to you so that it opens your mind to form your own perspective and analysis. To both my guests, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much. Look forward to debating again.